childhood. I have been to Epstein Island and on multiple Lolita Express types of flights as a child. After I went public, Child Protective Services opened a substance-exposed newborn case, even though all tests came back negative, and they told me that if I wouldn't stop posting on social media, I would never see my daughter again. I started to connect how I was adopted as an infant and then sold throughout my childhood, how many other children who have been through the adoption, foster, and CPS pipelines have also been trafficked to Epstein's Elk.
And as many of you guys know already, based on the work that we do at the Karis Project, I'm an American Indian born in Canada under the Jay Treaty. My father and I were exposed in the improper contagion mitigation for the COVID pandemic in early 2020. As a result of this, I lost everything: a house, cars, corporate assets, jobs. Bank accounts were shut down in Canada, and I fled to the US as an American Indian, fully documented, and was trafficked by rogue agents in ICE and other agents in the government, and forced to live with single American men. I was even imprisoned for 7 months initially, and then trafficked throughout the states. Put on full surveillance tracking and wasn't allowed to leave the city house or state without permission or work without permission. And that happened for many years, and I was on and off the streets because of that, and in and out of shelters. And that is just a small example of what many go through in this trafficking system, be it the family courts or otherwise. So that's why the Karis Project will be going to DC to speak with representatives and do live reporting. We're also going to be in contact with other families who are dealing with human trafficking, and through the CPS courts or through any other means, lesser versions of trafficking, and doing reporting on them live and otherwise. We will also be working on, we ultimately want to shine light on what's going on with the trafficking here in the US. And we also want to meet with various agencies in DC, and we'll be going back and forth for training sessions and other things so that we can be better equipped to help people deal with resolving some of the issues that we're seeing. We will also be putting forth petitions in government to help people get justice, and that's something that we have been working on already so far. We have some petitions that have recently been filed in the state of Colorado, Michigan, Texas, and Arizona, and we will be continuing.
But we can't do this on our own. We will be traveling to events and training courses, as well as DC on a consistent basis. We also have to get acceptable equipment, such as computers, cameras, interview gear, etc. There will be other miscellaneous costs that would also be like gas, food, and rooms if necessary.
So that is why we are working towards combating human trafficking, and that is exactly why we need your help. We cannot do this alone, and most what the Karis Project does is on its own dime. And so we do love and appreciate each and every one of you that support us and all the work that we do. As many of you know, we also live stream on Lindell TV every day. And everything we do, like I said, is on our own dime. So we appreciate all the love and support and all the people who do donate. And we would very much love and appreciate that still. Thank you everybody for your time and considerations. And thank you for all the support. And we will catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully we might see you guys in the future and come across you and maybe be able to do some great things together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Yes, we are here coming back today to talk about some feminism, its effects, the grooming culture, and all of this stuff. So you want to kind of touch a little bit on the feminism?
Hey y'all, Kaysha here. What's good in the proverbial hood? Yeah, feminism, honestly, feminists have a slave master's mentality. They want people to do all the work and get all the benefit and just sit by and then complain when things don't go their way. There's a boatload of things wrong with feminism. I don't think we need to screen them all out here in the introduction. just now, but I think you kind of get it. But yeah, I think you kind of get it. It's the same kind of nonsense, same stuff, different pile. We're gonna be going through some clips and stuff like that. So yeah, let's just get to it then, innit?
Yeah, let me just come back here 1 second. Let me get this here, um, and we'll
Oh,
start
just
up here.
kidding. Yeah. Hello again. Wow. Look at that.
Okay, we're gonna just start here with some feminists talking about feminism and some other stuff that's going on with it. So we'll just pull this up right now.
The feminism movement didn't unite women, it split women.
I feel totally the
Wait,
opposite.
listen, 50% of young women don't want to have children. They're really preoccupied with making money and materialism.
But we're still looking at a society that is increasingly telling women where they could be better.
But sometimes feminism expects women to be prioritized, and both sexes want the privileges without the responsibilities.
Can I just add, we are producing women and men who are and I'll tell you what I mean by that. It'll be an interesting discussion.
We're joined by 3 leading and outspoken voices in female societal issues with very different opinions.
To unpack the choices and consequences women face in modern society.
The sexual revolution gave women freedom.
But things like the washing machine, women entering the labour force, the pill had enormous social changes. For instance, it gave the illusion that sex was consequence-free.
But the second wave of the feminist movement was every woman should want free sex, and yet 82% of young women are depressed and anxious after casual sexual encounters. Or every woman should want to go out to work and leave their children in daycare. But we are doing terrible damage to our children by putting them in daycare.
This strain of feminism has basically aspired as much as possible to make women like men. And now gender roles are changing.
And we've gone so far, so we have women dominating men.
How are we dominating men, though?
Oh, my goodness. 60% of college students are women.
It's not us dominating
No,
men.
let me finish. Young men are afraid of women and the power they have over them.
Oh, God, to blame feminism for those things. I mean, it's insane.
But there are solutions.
I'm just going to jump in there and talk about a report that came out in 2025. And this was really shocking. What are your thoughts about this?
Okay.
So,
first of all,
Yes. Go ahead.
Don't mind me, by the way, slapping my screen because there's stupid gnats. Sorry, summer bugs. Anyway, yeah, honestly, that's the truth. Like, women, they don't want to have children. Everyone wants them to prioritize like casual sex and career. It's destroying women. Women also, like the one lady said, are extremely anxious and depressed after those casual encounters. Like, they tell them that it's better and it's not. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I agree with much of what that one lady said. The other lady sitting there acting like confused, like, oh, how are we dominating men, this and that. Like, sometimes I really ask myself, do these people believe the words that come out of their mouth? Like, do they believe the gaslighting and the lies that's coming out of their mouth? Or are they just like, are they genuine like manipulators? Like, are they professional gaslighters? Because there's no way like you can live a female experience and like say some of these things. And like the one lady said, like, you have the washing machine and everything like that. Like, we don't have to work as hard to wash clothes now. Which, yeah, that's great. That's great. But, and like even cooking is like a lot easier because, you know, back then perhaps you would have to, you know, do things over fire or, you know, whatever else the case might be. And now it's a little bit more simple with like ovens and, you know, stovetop and all the kitchen gadgets that we have now. It's just women are exceptionally lazy. They want to compete with men in an area that men predominantly do. And then they don't want to focus on doing what they can do well. But also society doesn't even give us really the option to comfortably do that. Like, a lot of men, they will say that they want a traditional woman. But then when a traditional woman comes along and says, okay, well, I want to stay home and raise the kids and like, you know, do that, or like maybe work for you, whatever your business is, let's start a business together or something and have like a family business, like the way that things traditionally was, mom and pop kind of shop thing. then the men are like, oh no, you're a bum, you're like like a mooch or whatever, or like, and the average stay-at-home wife saves a man $80,000 to $100,000 a year. It's
Yeah.
like, anyways, I
Yes.
could go on.
No, that's fine. Let's go back and look at, now they're going to start talking about the sexual revolution. And so we're going to listen to what these women have to say. And keep in mind, these women are feminists, right? They're not conservative. These women are feminists. So let's listen to what they have to say.
I write about ideas for a living. I don't have like a political agenda. I just write and say things that I think are true. In terms of how I arrived at some of my views on what we're going to talk about today, sexual revolution, I think I was raised with a lot of the assumptions around the sexual revolution, which are sort of like the water that we swim in now culturally. And it wasn't until I got to university that I started gradually unpicking them. After I left university, I worked in a rape crisis centre, which was quite formative for me in that I saw some of the ways in which some of the feminist theory that I had learnt at university didn't quite map onto reality. And then after leaving that job, I became a journalist. Again, I kept thinking about these things. And I guess I've reached a point where I take a very mixed view of this history. I think there are good things. I think there are bad things that have come out of the sexual revolution.
Louise, can you define for me what you mean by sexual revolution for anybody that doesn't know? Because it's going to be quite an important term today.
Right. So I think that there are two things, really. The ideological event, really, of the 1960s and 1970s. So this was a period of, not just in relation to sexual relationships, but all sorts of things, a period of really questioning and challenging traditional ideas, and particularly traditional Christian ideas about what sexual relationships ought to look like. I think actually the point that we've reached in terms of progressive culture is the assumption that those traditional ideas are necessarily questionable, are necessarily fit to be challenged. I think that's the ideological thing that we're talking about. But there's this other thing that happens at the same time, which is partially connected, which is a material change. So you have the introduction of the pill, the advent of safe abortion. Remember, historically, abortion is not safe. So you have the advent of safe abortion, and of course, it's decriminalization. You have things like the washing machine and central heating and all sorts of other domestic appliances, domestic technologies, which actually have been enormously important in changing sexual relationships, because all of a sudden it means that this basically takes less time to run a home, and so it becomes more possible for women to enter the workforce. So then you see this wave of not only changing marriage rates and birth rates, but also women entering the labour force en masse, and really some enormous social changes, like so enormous that it can be a little bit hard in 2025 to realise how enormous they were, because we've become used to them.
Thoughts?
I mean, yeah, there's less time in one way to run the home. In another way, there's more time to run the home in one way, and in another way there's less time, because it really depends on, because society has moved forward in every way. It means everything that there's a lot of things that are easier, and there's a lot of things that are piled on or compiled. It becomes like a compiled kind of issue or thing. And now, the way that school is done now, it was not done before. So now you have to consider, okay, well, now you have to go and teach your child all these subjects and take the time to actually tutor them and help them learn their lessons and things like that. And if you actually consider what it takes to be a full-time mom, that is a full-time job. Regardless of new age, old age, traditional or modern, a stay-at-home mom is a full-time job. You will have something to do all day. Unless you're the type of parent who puts your child in front of an iPad, that's why a lot of people think that, there's less to do. But if you're actually raising your child correctly, you're training them physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, nutritionally, you're doing things that are well-rounded for your child's well-being and learning teaching them to cook, clean, sew, embroider, stitch, do yard work, gardening, reading the Bible, maybe learning another language, learning an instrument, piano, trumpet, whatever, painting, whatever they want to do, basketball. You should constantly be teaching your child something that can help them progress forward. You would have a full day. If you're a real mother, you have a full day's of work on top of the cooking and cleaning that you have to do to take care of your home, which is a lot. Most parents today, they put their kid to daycare or they put them in front of the iPad and they throw some chicken nuggets in the oven and they call it a day. That's not being a mother.
But they also, the thing that she mentioned is that they associated it with Christianity and the move away from what they were doing.
Right.
The sexual revolution is anti-Christian, 100%.
Right.
Right?
Because it's demonic. It's demonic.
But it's designed to break down the Christian faith and the family structure that was upheld by Christianity in America and in the Western world. So let's continue on and listen to what these guys have to say.
We'll talk about all of that today. Going clockwise then, Erica, same question to you about your background and the work that's fed into the perspective you have.
I'm a psychoanalyst in private practice. I'm an author. I write books about parenting. And the book I'm probably most well known for is my book, Being There. And it's basically about the neuroscience of attachment, or the importance of mothers in the first 3 years of a child's life to create emotional security, which lays down the foundation for mental health in the future. And so from my perspective, I guess the conversation we're going to have, I should say right off the bat, I consider myself a feminist, but I consider myself a term that I like better and that my community uses, the people that I work with, and which is I consider myself a maternal feminist. Basically, there was a school of thought called maternal feminism, which really elevated women in their work as mothers and really talked about it as very important work. And so I'm not an anti-feminist, and I'm certainly for women to have choice. So it'll be an interesting discussion. I guess you could say I'm more of a centrist on this topic. As Louise said, there are parts of feminism that I think really helped women, and there are parts that really did a lot of harm to children.
And lastly, Deborah.
Yes.
Same question to you.
So I am best known as the host of the Guilty Feminist podcast. And I started that podcast to learn about feminism. And I have since researched a lot. I wrote a book called The Guilty Feminist. I've just written a book called 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have, which does also challenge some of the directions that we've gone, but more in about how combative we've become as progressive people to each other, and how difficult it is to talk to people on the right now, and how we need to get back in rooms and we need to be having difficult discussions like this.
Everybody starts a podcast and they're an expert. I guess we're on a podcast too, but I mean, it's funny because she wrote a book. She read The Guilty Feminist, and then she started a podcast called that, and then wrote her own book, six questions, something we're afraid to ask. Man, I'm sorry, but like the problem with a lot of that is that you go down one track. The way she's talking, she went and researched the feminism. Okay, but what about all the varying degrees of things surrounding it that created the circumstances for that, or the varying degrees of things surrounding it that affected or all the avenues that were affected? What about the things that, not just the thing itself, not just the thing when it started? What about the one who shot the bullet before it hit the target? What about the person who made the gun, the person holding the gun, the person who created the materials and engineered them? Like, there's all these level of things that she's not thinking about when she's approaching that way. And that's really the problem in doing that. This, I can already see, and based on the things we've seen her say earlier, like, I already know what it is. I already know what it's going to be. I'm just
yes.
Like, you got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah, and so this is a little different with the way that they're talking about things. But we'll play the next clip, and then we'll kind of dig in a little bit more, because then we're going to... What?
But also quickly, the one lady said she's the maternal feminist, and they actually promote the importance of motherhood, and especially in the first 3 years of life for the child, because that it creates the emotional mental stability. But that's actually the opposing ideology to feminism. Feminism will tell you that.
but
that's written in, like, if you look at feminism in its infancy, the people who actually wrote the first writings of feminists officially,
yes,
I
but
guess,
they didn't push it that way. Because women were
no,
strongly pro mother, and that's how they initially started it. But that was
but they
not
said
the
go against
intention.
God. They
Yes,
said go against God and man.
but they didn't openly push that. They didn't do it because most people would have
They wrote it
rejected
in
it.
the first books. They
Yes, but
didn't
it
print
wasn't.
it that way, but they
But
wrote
it
it in the first
wasn't.
writings.
But most people, when the women's right movement came, a lot of them
Yeah, they weren't
didn't read
talking
the.
like that.
They weren't reading the books.
They weren't reading the books, exactly. But the people who actually started it, they were not reading the
No,
literature of the
no. The average
originators.
person, the average woman,
Yeah,
wasn't here. They were just selling them the ideas on feeling good.
ideas. Yeah,
Yes.
kind of like influencers online pushing a certain narrative.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's listen to these guys a little bit more.
So it's interesting what Louise says about being raised in a progressive household, but then being disillusioned and thinking that there's some ways in which life was better before the sexual revolution, because I'm effectively a time traveler. I did live before the sexual revolution because when I was 14, just coming into my puberty, my family joined a religious cult. I didn't have any normal sexual development, and I didn't get out. I didn't escape that patriarchal cult till I was in my mid-20s. So I know what it is, and I do not believe women want it. I know what it is to not have autonomy, to not have agency, and to not have emotional freedom. And those are the three big things that I think the sexual revolution gave women. First of all, agency. I think it's just agency is so important. So agency is just the ability to go around and choose what you do moment to moment. And autonomy is, can I decide what my life looks like, the shape of my life? What choices do I have? And emotional freedom is the third one. And I don't think the sexual revolution did give us emotional freedom, because I think we're still sitting in a lot of guilt as women as to, like, if I'm at work, I should be at home with my children. If I'm at home with my children, am I providing for them financially well enough? Or am I going to have a career when I go back to work? If I'm doing both of those things very well, am I a good enough daughter, friend? Am I running a half marathon for charity? Like, we are in a stage of such guilt. That's why my show and one of my books is called The Guilty Feminist, because I felt that feminism had become another thing to feel guilty about. And so anything to me that engenders more shame in women or more guilt in women, or takes their autonomy away, even emotionally, for me, I would like to move far away from that. Mm-hmm. Because in my life, every year I've been away from that cult, and I have had more autonomy and more emotional freedom. I have felt more spaciousness, and I have become a better person, mm-hmm. a better partner. I have maternal roles in my life. It makes me so much better in those roles if I'm filled up, if I'm creatively fulfilled. And it also makes me a better person in my community in every way. So that's, for me, what feminism is.
So autonomy, emotional freedom, and agency.
Do you know when women had the least emotional guilt in history? The least emotional guilt and concern? When men were responsible as men and women were responsible as women. When women were doing women roles and men were doing men roles, they didn't have any guilt because they weren't accountable to things that had nothing to do with them.
If you listen to what she's saying about taking away guilt, people understand that they have responsibility.
That's what I'm trying to say.
She wants to remove the guilt from neglecting your own children and your responsibilities. So what you want, she's promoting, is that you want to do whatever you want and forget about your responsibility and don't feel guilty about or the consequences or the harm that you're causing to other people, because what you want to do is most important. This is an extremely dangerous thing that she is promoting, because if you're taking away from the well-being of your children, you should feel guilty because you're damaging your children.
Right.
If you don't have to put food on their table, then let the man do it and look after your children so you don't feel bad, because who is raising those children? Not you.
Do you know who she sounds like? Oh, go ahead, continue.
No,
Finish first.
That's what I had to say.
Do you know who she sounds like?
Who?
My mother.
Oh.
And my mother does crack, and she's also a lady of the night. That's who speaks like that. People who are addicted to crack and people who do OnlyFans or prostitution. That's who talks like that. My mother told me the same similar stuff about why she abandoned me when I was a baby, didn't breastfeed me or take care of me, left me in the hospital to die of meningitis, mind you, a couple weeks old. Anyways, she wanted to live her best life. She wanted to go out and do whatever she wanted to do. Of course, I was an accident, so whatever, things happen. But that's what the type of woman, she sounds like an addict. She wants to do everything that her desires is. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and she shall find it too. So, this is crazy to me. I was listening to this and I couldn't help but laugh, because I'm like, this is what I meant by when I said women had less emotional guilt when they were doing the roles that they were fulfilled to do, that they were meant to do biologically and through God,
but
when they were actually in the home taking care of their wifely and motherly duties and didn't have to be thinking about things that have nothing to do with them. Then they wouldn't have to worry about the guilt of, neglecting. But they want to serve themselves. They don't want to truly serve their family. She's like, I'm doing my best when I'm in my creative role and all this other stuff. You can have all the things for yourself. But you know what? Every single thing that I taught myself in life, even right down to every language that I've learned, I told myself from the time I was small that I'm learning this so that I can one day teach it to children. I could care less for most of the things that I've learned. I want to one day give it to children.
The one thing is that guilt is not a bad thing. People act like guilt is a bad thing. Too much guilt is bad. But if you got rid of any emotion or anything that we feel that is negative, that's wrong. Imagine if you never felt pain and you had your hand in the fire, it would burn to a crisp and you'd have no idea. So feeling pain isn't a bad thing. It helps you know that maybe I shouldn't do this, and let your frontal lobes come in and deal with this. Let's take a short commercial break and we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
And if you need the MyPillow products, go to mypillow.com/Karis or call 800-845-2942. Use the promo code Karis. You can get the energy drinks. You can get the beds, the bed sheets, the pillows. Obviously, they're great. They've got bath stuff, kitchen stuff, the house coat, slippers, all of that good stuff. Try it out. Support a good cause. Or if you're watching on Rumble, BitChute, or Facebook, you'll see all the links in the description, or you can go to all my links /the Karis Project, or you can support when you see in the description. Obviously, you see that in the ticker, there's the MyPillow, but then you'll see the donor box and the Give, Send, Go, support a good cause, the fight against human trafficking. If you like the content, by all means, and please share, subscribe, and share, please. This is important stuff that we're talking about. And so now we're going to go up a little bit further because we're going to come back to the agency part, but they're going to start talking about the pornography, which is this comes out of the sexual revolution and an increase of this. But we're going to go back to the agency a little bit after. But I want to bring some clips up of them talking about this. So let me bring this up here. And so they start talking.
I want to talk about one last subject, which is the subject of pornography.
You left this for the end. Cool.
Doorknob effect.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how you all think that the impacts and implications of pornography impact everything we've talked about today, whether it's men, it's women, it's children, etc., and also how that ties into feminism.
I would say there is increasing evidence that everything we do alone on our phone excessively is causing us to disassociate, is causing us to get some kind of addiction property from it, is causing us to dysregulate, is causing the breakdown of regular communication in society. So,
do you think porn is a net negative for society?
I think it's a moot point because it's always been there and it's always going to be there. But I would like...
But if you could press a button and get rid of it, and pressing that button, would that cause society to be better or worse in terms of happiness, if we use that as a metric, and any of the metrics that one would use?
Honestly, it's like saying, can you press a button and get rid of human sexuality? I don't know what the world would look like if people weren't seeking it out. But there is no before we had porn. People always drew things and looked through walls.
Can I say that when it was two-dimensional, when boys had a Playboy magazine under their bed, or they stole their father's Playboy magazine, that was actually less harmful than the movies and the video, because two-dimensional isn't as powerful as the, I guess, video. I mean, I'm saying films. Yeah.
Modern porn is a super stimulus.
Yeah.
It's a completely different, it's not like
real action is
like
not, is
saucy
not good
murals in Pompeii, right? It's designed to be incredibly stimulating, like and it's very clever, actually, like the way that the porn platforms work. It's a clever product, and like we're talking about unregulated capitalism, like this is the preeminent example. It's designed to tap in to our most profound desires. I mean, particularly for men using it, it's like hyper-visual, everything's exaggerated. One of the reasons why it's a bad idea to use porn in general, aside from it being super unethical as an industry, is it will make the rest of your sex life worse generally, because it will mean that real sex will not measure up. If you've trained your brain to enjoy the super stimulus, the normal stimulus becomes less exciting. Like how if you eat junk food, then it becomes less attractive to eat vegetables or whatever.
Sorry. There we go. So they talk about pornography, and one woman said she doesn't know because and this is one of the things that you see with a lot of this conversation, is that they don't answer some of these more difficult or hot button topics, which really need to be dealt with, right? And yeah. So your thoughts, Kaysha?
I mean, porn is going to be harmful regardless. And like when, like I said, that person invited me to their performance event, they were like rapping or whatever, and they were at the strip club or whatever. And when I was watching those girls, I was like, this is why, like I was watching the whole environment, but I'm seeing what's going on, but like I'm watching it, like thinking to myself, okay, this is why men are so like deluded. They're watching these girls do this stuff. They think this is like normal. This performance stuff is normal. And they're like, dropping from a pole all the way high, like to the bottom, and like stopping, do like all this stuff that you can really get hurt from. Like it takes a lot of practice. And then they're watching this stuff, think it's normal, and then probably want to replicate it. And like the girl said, it's like junk food. You're eating so much junk food that regular food doesn't taste good to you anymore. Like healthy food will not taste good to you. You won't appreciated. And then we remember what the neurologist said from the documentary we were doing the clips from, where when you're watching this stuff, it rewires the circuits in your brain. It actually changed your brain chemistry and like the neural pathway and stuff. So it's a harmful, like scientifically, like proven harmful.
All right. So now
Never
now
mind.
we're going to look at a couple of clips from people that are in the pornography industry that are talking about it. And they're talking about the male performers, particularly. Keep in mind that a lot of men are watching pornography and people are watching this from young. So listen to what this woman has to say, because she just had a bombshell revelation. I guess it was a few years ago, but then they brought people on later on to talk about it. But hear what she has to say.
It seems like the straight porn world doesn't really overlap with the gay porn world. Is that true or not true?
People make a fuss about it, but at the end of the day, I mean, oh, I won't work with this guy because he does gay porn and he does straight porn. And it's like, no one knows anyone knows off camera. So, and I mean, even with the test, your test is only as good as the day you got tested. So it's, I don't really, as long as someone has a clean test, I don't feel like they're any more of a risk than anyone else. Because I don't know, at least I know what they do. You know what I mean? It's those people that you find out and you hear stories about that it's like, wow.
Like, I mean, for example, we're not going to put his name out, but I know of a black male porn star that has had a lot of rumors about him messing with trannies.
So many come to mind.
Really?
Yeah.
I know of one. That's a.
I mean, I don't know if I could fill up one hand with guys in porn who I can definitely guarantee you are even straight.
Really?
Yes.
So you think that most male porn stars are bisexual?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And nothing's wrong with that. I just wish they'd admit it.
Interesting.
I'm more comfortable with a person who admits it. I don't like when people hide things for whatever reason. But yeah, like there are straight ones, but they're very few.
Really? So what percentage of male porn stars do you feel are bisexual?
More than half. More, like
60%, 70%?
75%.
3 out of 4.
Yeah.
So 3/4 of the male porn stars you watch on camera are having sex with men as well.
I think so.
Off camera.
I think so.
Interesting. I've never heard that before.
That's my opinion. I mean, just because the things that I've heard, things that I observe, things that you know guys will tell me. You know, there are not all of them are in the closet about it. Some of them are honest. Then there's ones who are like, I'm not gay, I just like trannies. And it's like, okay. And it's like, I'm not gay, he sucked my dick. And it's like, alright. Like, there's very few guys who are not about that at all. You know what I mean? Like, who are just like, no. Like, the kind, yeah. There's very few.
I mean, like, it's...
That I know of.
You know, if you're a male porn star who's doing, like, double vaginal or double anal.
Okay.
I mean, like, it's a bit of a hard justification
I
to
don't know
say
where
you're
they
straight.
have to go in their brain to be able to do that if they're not
and remain aroused.
bisexual. Yeah.
And, you know...
It's like, yeah, I'm rubbing against another guy. But it's not gay because we're in a girl. Like, okay.
Have you ever done that?
No.
No. Would you do it?
Maybe. It just doesn't really turn me on because I don't know. I feel like I'm being used as a beard. Like on the cover. Like they really want each other and they're just using my self to stay straight. Like, I don't know. I have a complex, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't try it. I would. I just haven't yet. I just haven't crossed that bridge yet, I guess. But that's how I feel about it. I'm like, okay, wow. Especially guys who are really into it. Yes! Like a lot of... I sound like an idiot saying this. But a lot of European guys... Like, I remember I was on a live show. And it was a group thing, and it was live. And on camera, live, they're like... This one guy was just so hyped, like, yes, let's do double anal with Kelly. And like, I mean, but I was like, no, and the other guy was like, no, and he kept pressing it to the point that me and him got into a fight on camera. But I was just like, why was he so excited? Like, why do you care? You can go in there, but I just don't want two in there. Why must you rub against Ramon's thing? Like, why, or whoever, you know what I mean? Like, what is that about?
Yeah, that's pretty gay. Like, porn in general is gay. Watching porn is gay. Participating is gay. Because, like, there's, you're watching the same sex do that, and you're participating with the same sex in doing that, and you're getting off with the same sex doing that. Like, it puts
But
something in your brain. Like,
but think about what they're doing, right? Like they're showing a little kid watching this, they're already feminizing boys. And they're gonna see men doing things like that with like
with men, yeah.
and the girls already think this way, and then they're gonna start accepting this because they're being wired that this is what men are supposed to do. Right? When they're being exposed to this. And what do you think is going to happen to the next set of people who have been wired like this kind of stuff in their brain? Remember, they're pushing this stuff to children, right? Where you see that, grown adults like, I don't want to see that, but some people will. Like, right? They see their favorite porn star starting to do that, and two men are jumping on top of them and doing that, and then they're going to get turned on by it, and then it's just going to get conditioned to see that. But if you're a child and you start seeing that, there's no way you're going to have any chance. You're just going to think that that's. Right. And why do you think you're seeing so many people that are so confused about their sexuality?
Yeah, they're watching a lot of messed up stuff. And then they're also being like groomed and abused. Like some of them, like in the school being groomed for sure. And then some of them actually being physically abused, like touched. And then you got the teachers coming around raping little boys every week. There's a new one on the news. Like, it's not even funny, but I mean, like, it's just the fact that it's become an epidemic at this point, and it's still not, like, no one, it seems like no one is, like, investigating as to why this is such a big thing. They just keep dropping them on the news like new Pokemon just dropped, and it's just like, bro, do something.
Yeah, so we're going to listen to a guy and a girl talk about this clip briefly before we go back to these other girls, these other feminists. But these guys came back and they brought up the same conversation, what she said. So let's look at that.
2 years ago, we interviewed Kelly Devine.
Mm-hmm.
You guys know her?
Mm-hmm. I don't know her personally.
I know her very well. You've done scenes together and everything? She said something that kind of shook things up a little bit. It got over 300,000 views. So what percentage of male porn stars do you feel are bisexual?
More than half. More, like
60%, 70%?
75%.
3 out of 4.
Yeah.
I would say 85.
Word?
85.
I would say maybe. Maybe
Real
there's just
talk.
something I don't know about.
Real talk.
Okay, I'll let you speak on because I got to work next to the. I got to work shoulder to shoulder with some of these.
Yeah,
dudes.
you can't be saying too much, but I
More
can.
than just the shoulder, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah, yo. Really? 80? You think 80?
Seriously, 85. I'm not being disrespectful. It's just what it is. And I've worked with male talent. I'm not gonna name them. And I'm thinking, what is this guy's freaking problem? Like, it was going like up and down, and I never have an issue with a guy when I'm working with them. The guy's always like ready to go. And this guy is on my no list now. Come to find out, he had like a gay porn career prior to even working with me, being in the industry, but he's lying to people. Like, he thinks we're not going to find out. And that happens a lot. And I generally have a rule where I don't want to work with a guy who's a crossover performer, because I have nothing against, I have gay friends. I have gay friends that are married. I'm all for it. But I don't like the double dipping. I feel like if you're gay, stay in your lane. Don't come over to our industry, because that's how a lot of the straight industry gets put on moratorium. Yep. Thank you. And then we can't shoot, and it come to find out, sure enough, it's always a crossover performer. So not always, but most of the time. And then I find out that a lot of the guys that are performing in our industry in their private life are bi.
85%.
I would say 85.
Well, for example, Byron Long has done gay scenes before, at least one. I think Peter North.
He's dabbled. Richie Black, that's, you know.
So they usually have different names
Yes.
on the gay porn side.
But they think we're not going to find out because they get a new identity, but we're going to find out, you know, eventually. I mean, I found out after I already worked with the guy. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, as soon as I went into doggy style, showed him my butthole, sure enough, his dick went up real quick. You know what I mean?
Well, there's a few dynamics at play. You have guys in the industry that serve serious time in prison, and maybe they carried some of the practices from when they were incarcerated. It became a part of what they liked.
Yeah.
And so when they got into business, number one. Number two, you've got guys that are gay for play. Or gay for pay.
That doesn't exist, and I'll tell you why. If you can get it up, you are not gay for pay. You like it.
Okay. And then what about cuckold? Now you have guys who do the cuckold scenes and are allowing whoever's portraying the cuckold to blow them or touch them. I literally stopped doing cuckold scenes because the director that I was shooting for kept continuing to ask me, was I comfortable with how close the guy was getting to me? Mm-hmm. And I was like, look, I said, you know, I've done double vaginals, double anals, you know what I'm saying, where you're literally simultaneous in that particular orifice, but I knew that the guy that was also in the scene had no, you know, was 100% heterosexual.
Well, to be fair, a lot of people consider that gay.
Here's the thing.
I mean, double vaginal, double anal.
But I want
some people consider that gay.
Okay, well.
But look, there's levels to it. I don't want it to be black and white.
Well,
there's levels to it, though.
There's not levels.
Either gay or
I
straight?
think there's levels to it. I think there's different levels of gayness. I do. I know guys that have dudes, but they will only date women. They're not interested in dating guys, but once in a while they want to a guy.
Now that you know what I'm saying, that's beyond that's over the line. Not saying there's anything wrong, but that crosses a line.
Right, but then I know guys that will only fuck guys and they only date guys. They don't want nothing to do with the vagina. Like that's what I'm saying. There's levels to being gay. I feel there's like a spectrum of, you know.
You know what's crazy? She straight up said that she pretty much implied that only gay guys like anal. She pretty much said that the guy didn't want to get anything for her and then was like, but I shoved my butthole. That's crazy. And that means, like, ladies, you heard it from this porn star first. If a guy asks you that, he's probably gay. Honestly, man, what that other guy said, though, that's gay. The double penetration, that's gay. Like with the other man, that's gay. Rubbing against each other, like, it's one thing when you're in different orifices. I think that's still gay, but then they're together, that's gay, man. And the fact that they're sitting there doing it on camera and then they're still getting off, that's gay.
Yeah, so they're doing the mental gymnastics in their mind to justify.
Cross a line,
but
there's a difference.
You're watching.
Also, what happened? Sorry, what about the girls when they're gay? Because she was like, I don't want to work with male performers who's been gay. But all the women,
because
pretty much all the
they look at it as
are always sleeping with women.
They look at it as different, right? Because the man is getting it. I know, but I'm saying it's very emasculating for a man to bend over and be like a woman, right? Like, I mean,
whatever the female version of emasculation is still that when a woman tries
to do that,
like, because
but it's
when a woman tries to control you, it's like
I get it, but it's to another level with men, like even the Bible,
right? Yeah, because there's like the penetration and the entrance, and the domination,
So we're gonna go back to these women here quickly and let them go back on their subject here, talking back about pornography.
Like it's not like Playboy of the 50s.
Because it left room for fantasy. There's no, I mean, it's so explicit that it leaves no room for fantasy, even your own fantasy.
And is it harming men as well, Louise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not least, one of the things that is certainly anecdotally a massive problem with compulsive porn use is erectile dysfunction when you actually try and have sex with a real human being, because you've trained your brain and you've also trained the rest of your body to only respond to this particular stimulus and to masturbation.
If I put the button in front of you, like I said to Deborah, would you press it
of course I would.
End porn forever?
Of course I would. Porn is so bad for not least the porn performers. I mean, even just on that basis, in the same way that I would ban some hideously unethical industry that had nothing to do with sex. Because people, I mean, like the suicide rate among porn performers is appalling. Or like, I can't remember her name, but the most promiscuous woman in Australia, the OnlyFans model, who just last week had sex with 583 men in one day and was hospitalized subsequently, right? This is what we're talking about in practice. This is like a hideous industry. It is so bad for women. I cannot understand how feminists could endorse it. I just can't. It's one of my strongest opinions.
Would you ban saucy murals in Pompeii?
I can't. Right.
No, you can't ban anything. So would you? But there's the button, saucy murals in Pompeii. Which, by the way, is number 5 on the trends.
They're two-dimensional. I don't mind two-dimensional. It's funny. I don't mind two-dimensional. It's when it's live action. And actually with video games, they did studies to show that the more realistic the video games, the more harmful they were to teenagers. And so there's something about, so the murals were two-dimensional and maybe they would be considered art.
So you would press the button to end the three-dimensional porn,
yeah.
And you wouldn't press the button?
I mean, I just think...
The button's right there, what'd you do? You can press it, no one's watching.
Okay.
No one's watching is crazy. The thing is, no one's going to the walls of Pompeii to bust a nut. I'm sorry, forgive me for how crude that sounds, but it's like, you can't compare... You can't compare the two things in the slightest because no one's going over there and having addiction at the Pompeii walls. And come on, man, this is the level of delusion that we're talking about, where they'll say anything to feel better, to just justify whatever they're doing and just lie as they go, just add lies in real time in the conversation that they know have no relevance. Like, you can't even begin to compare even the damage between the two. You can't.
I get it. And this is where people need to start understanding what is actually going on. And you have to sit down and see, you look at that one woman, she has a hard time even trying to establish boundaries. And they're all having issues having the boundary because they don't know where it is. And they're all trying to figure it out. And when everybody doesn't have these set of boundaries, it's like trying to build a building and everybody's using a different standard of measure. And this is where you end up having so much confusion because all three of those women identify as feminists. They're just different, very different in their approach on what it means to them. How do you get to have any type of commonality when everybody's different on so many different ways? I'm not sitting down and say everybody has to be perfectly conformed, but you have to begin to understand that when you have no common ground, where do you begin? Where do you start? Like, how do you fix things? Right? Where do you begin? This is where you have a problem. Because one person's like, well, I can't say anything. It's just always going to be there. So just, it is what it is. Let anything go. You can't let anything go because some things are absolutely unethical, right? Like, I mean, what happens if it gets super violent or they start doing really abusive stuff? You can't sit down and say, well, it's just going to be there, right? Anyway. I'm going to close with a prayer here because we're running up on time. We'll come back on the next segment and get the rest of this out because this is some important stuff that we're getting into. And I'll give you your final thoughts. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the hope that you have given us this day. Open our hearts and our minds to your will. And Lord, I ask of you this day to get the men and the women to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, and our nation, that we would have some protection for the children and stop this evil wickedness is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dad, for the prayer as always, and thanks, guys, for joining us. We will catch you in part 2 segment on the other side. Yeah. Feminism is not it, guys. I don't know what else to say that. Anyways, catch us on the other side. Thank you for your time and considerations. We'll check you in the next one. And to my dearest Karis, until we meet again, my friend, and we will. Ciao. Hey everybody, Kaysha here, and today I am here with my friend
Jennifer Guskin,
and we need your help. We are right now working on advocacy for combating human trafficking, and here's why. So we'll give you a little bit of background of our story and why we're doing what we're doing.
I was adopted as an infant by a couple who sold me throughout my childhood. I have been to Epstein Island and on multiple Lolita Express types of flights as a child. After I went public, Child Protective Services opened a substance-exposed newborn case, even though all tests came back negative, and they told me that if I wouldn't stop posting on social media, I would never see my daughter again. I started to connect how I was adopted as an infant and then sold throughout my childhood, how many other children who have been through the adoption, foster, and CPS pipelines have also been trafficked to Epstein's ilk.
And as many of you guys know already, based on the work that we do at the Karis Project, I'm an American Indian born in Canada under the J Treaty. My father and I were exposed in the improper contagion mitigation for the COVID pandemic in early 2020. As a result of this, I lost everything: my house, cars, corporate assets, jobs. Bank accounts were shut down in Canada, and I fled to the US as an American Indian, fully documented, and was trafficked by rogue agents in ICE and other agents in the government, and forced to live with single American men. I was even imprisoned for 7 months initially, and then trafficked throughout the states. Put on full surveillance tracking and wasn't allowed to leave the city, house, or state without permission, or work without permission. And that happened for many years, and I was on and off the streets because of that, and in and out of shelters. And that is just a small example of what many go through in this trafficking system, be it the family courts or otherwise. So that's why the Karis Project will be going to DC to speak with representatives and do live reporting. We're also going to be in contact with other families who are dealing with human trafficking, and through the CPS courts or through any other means, lesser versions of trafficking, and doing reporting on them live and otherwise. We will also be working on, we ultimately want to shine light on what's going on with the trafficking here in the US. And we also want to meet with various agencies in DC, and we'll be going back and forth for training sessions and other things so that we can be better equipped to help people deal with resolving some of the issues that we're seeing. We will also be putting forth petitions in government to help people get justice, and that's something that we have been working on already so far. We have some petitions that have recently been filed in the state of Colorado, Michigan, Texas, and Arizona, and we will be continuing.
But we can't do this on our own. We will be traveling to events and training courses, as well as DC on a consistent basis. We also have to get acceptable equipment, such as computers, cameras, interview gear, etc. There will be other miscellaneous costs that would also be like gas, food, and rooms if necessary.
So that is why we are working towards combating human trafficking, and that is exactly why we need your help. We cannot do this alone, and most what the Karis Project does is on its own dime. And so we do love and appreciate each and every one of you that support us and all the work that we do. As many of you know, we also live stream on Lindell TV every day. And everything we do, like I said, is on our own dime. So we appreciate all the love and support and all the people who do donate. And we would very much love and appreciate that still. Thank you everybody for your time and considerations. And thank you for all the support. And we will catch you guys in the next one, and hopefully we might see you guys in the future and come across you and maybe be able to do some great things together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Karis Project podcast. We're at episode 126 of the Matrix Reloaded, and we are back on talking about feminism and so forth. Yeah, you want to kind of give us a little bit before we get into it?
Hey y'all, what's good in the proverbial hood? Kaysha here. Yeah, we're just talking in the previous episode about feminism and the effects of that on the various aspects of society, like, you know, in the family, like in your home, with your children. They touched on the effects of pornography and the sexual revolution, and, you know, if they thought that was necessary. So we're going to keep up with going through some of the clips and, you know, give our opinion of it and the like. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to come up and we're going to go back to the women that we're talking about. We're going to go back to the feminists, and we're going to listen to what they have to say. And this is the last segment there on pornography.
The wholesome couple who were really into each other, I thought this is modeling something that I think is very healthy. People doing violent things to women, and like hentai porn, which I discovered in my research, which is animated porn with like Lolita style girls that look really young and violent stuff. We need regulation and we need discussion. I am not the person to lead it, but, you know, if you would press the button to get rid of the saucy murals in Pompeii, then it's kind of erasing human sexuality, I think. And I don't know, what would you or not? Would you leave those up as a sort of little racy artifact?
What would you do, Louise?
I wouldn't put it up in a schoolroom. I mean, like, I think everyone accepts that even that really mild stuff needs to be like limited, if not, it needs to be limited, if not legally, then socially.
What about Statue of David? What about just the naked form?
No, I would not ban that. But Deborah, I think that this is a rhetorical trick to avoid the fact that this is the least feminist industry we can conceptualize. And a lot of feminists have really dropped the ball on this and have actually decided to prioritize their own status and their own commitment to sexual liberalism over actual real women who have been sexually tortured within this industry. And it makes me really angry. And I think that, I mean, this is true in all sorts of areas of feminism. I mean, what we're doing here is an intra-feminist argument, right? Like, we're all basically starting from the same position, which is we think that women's interests ought to be protected, that women's flourishing ought to be promoted, children's too. What we're arguing about is over how to do that. And that's an argument that's going to go on forever and has gone on forever. And I think it's good. We should have these arguments. But if we can't start from the premise that, like, the sexual torture of women for profit is bad, then what are we doing?
Why does it make you angry? And what part of it makes you angry? as it relates to feminism?
It possibly is partly from having worked with victims, I think, but I guess it's the dishonesty I just don't like. I'm not accusing of being dishonest, but I just think that this ideology is just so riven with contradictions.
Where did feminism drop the ball?
In prioritizing the interests of a small, unrepresentative group of women over the interests of other women. And I don't just mean in terms of like class or wealth, although that is a factor. I mean, a lot of it is to do with personality. We've talked about agency. We've talked about some people are more maternal than others. You know, I think that one of the perennial problems with feminism is that the women who tend to sort of rise to the top and get media careers, I do realize I'm in this category, are not representative of other women and will often have preferences that are very different, which are just not shared by everyone else.
Just listening to them talk, you can see the problem. What's going on? You can see the problems because they're all trying to represent women, but everybody's got their different viewpoints, and many of them are pulling in different directions. That's you can't. Like, I mean, like she said, you can't get to the point that like torturing women is bad, but you can't just look at the interests of women because that's not the way humanity works. It's a very unrealistic look at humanity, and a one-sided approach will always fail. Go ahead.
I agree. I think it's a very dishonest conversation. They're lying to fit the small interest of the one bit, and those women are just being exploited. That's why they're allowing them to do it, because they make a lot of money from that exploitation. And it is the sexual torture of women. Now, what she said about that hentai, when I was in middle school, everybody was watching hentai. I don't know how the hell that was going around. At 1 minute, kids were watching regular anime, and then somehow everyone was watching hentai or whatever. Like, that was like something that everybody understood. For a long time, I thought that hentai was just what was called anime. Like, you know, regular anime shows. Because like when I was in middle school, the anime shows that I saw were very close to very sexually explicit. Like, they had a lot of scenes that were very questionable, that were very implicative. You know, the brother and sister stuff, it was all weird, but that was very typical. But now, you know, I've come across some animes, of course, that are not like that. I don't know if it's like that everywhere. This is what I seen in Canada. Like, all the animes just had this weird overtone of constant, like, sexually explicit stuff, and they were just regular shows, regular anime shows. So it was weird. I don't know, but she's right about that one thing. But I don't think she was talking about it to, like, point out that thing. I think she was using it to do the delusion, like what the other girl was talking about. So yeah.
Yes, and it's like we're gonna go back and this. I mean, we're going to bring this clip up again before we play the next clip so that you can just keep it fresh in your mind on what is end up happening when they're watching this. And then we're going to go to the next clip of this girl talking about the pornography. But this is how they're getting aroused and their minds are getting changed.
Yeah, it's been really incredible to see women like you taking, you know, this message and using, you know, porn as a platform for it, which is just so different. I mean, porn before was always, you know, this dirty, seedy underbelly of media, and, you know, it was just to, you know, get guys hard and that's it. But now it's like it's become so much more complex, and there's, you know, there's a message behind it now, and it's just like it's evolved into something so much bigger than just porn, and it's been such an exciting thing to witness.
Yeah, and I mean, pretty much everybody watches porn. So it is actually a very powerful platform.
Yes.
And it's also powerful because when people are watching porn, they're often masturbating, and when you're masturbating and you receive messages when you're in that pleasure zone, you know, it's a you know, it can kind of seep in, and
because it is an intimate, vulnerable time, right? I mean, people always like, you know, privately, well, not everybody, but you know what I'm saying? It's like a private moment where you lock your bedroom door and you put on headphones or whatever, you know, your roommates to hear, God forbid, your mom to walk in or something like that. So it is this private, intimate moment. So yeah, I could see how like it is this vulnerable time that you could be, you know, giving people not only pleasure, but, you know, I don't want to say like teaching them a morality lesson, but there's almost something to that there.
The way I see it is more giving them the opportunity to think of, giving the opportunity of to see different ways of being, or different ways of exploring their sexuality, different ways of experiencing the world, different ways of interacting with people. So even if it's like, for example, I've had fans that have been following me since 2003, fans that, you know, just started following me because they like big breasts, never expecting that I would do a trans scene. And now, because they've followed me through this time, they may have never expected to enjoy watching a trans scene themselves, but because they're my fan, they've committed to watching the movie, and then suddenly they watch it and, wow, they're exposed to a different, you know, a different kind of sex that they end up enjoying. You know.
And for example, doing that, the double vaginal prepares them for that because they're watching two men rub together and all that kind of stuff as well. And then they have women like her who is very, very smart and is going out to push the boundaries and do all of these things to explore, because when people is like think that, oh, if you do certain things, it doesn't feel good. Of course it feels good because sex is pleasurable. But some of the things that you do, they become wrong. Right? Because even though you didn't wake up doing this, they were like how she's talking about. She explores it, they enjoy her, and associate something else that they wouldn't normally do that, and then so forth. And this is happening in many, many situations. But imagine when they're doing this to children. Like you said, the hentai, and then they start getting into the pornography that they're getting on the phones, and then they're finished. Like they said, they get like a huge dopamine hit and so forth, and then they get that situation. And then now we're going to go back to this one girl, and she's going to hear her take on that conversation that they had. Do you have any comments on this? Kaysha? Any comments? All right, so this girl is going back and they're asking her about that same girl, Kelly. And then we're going to roll back to the feminists and listen to them talk.
We've interviewed Kelly Divine at one point, and she said something that kind of reacted. It got like hundreds of thousands of views. She said that she feels that 75% of male porn stars are bisexual. And then I interviewed Nikki Benz recently, and she said that it's 85%. What percentage of male porn stars do you feel are bisexual?
More than half. More, like
60%, 70%?
75%.
3 out of 4.
Yeah.
I would say 85.
Word?
What's your guess?
95?
95%. So Jenna Ivory is upping the number, and you're saying that 95% of male porn stars are bisexual. Why would you say that?
Well, because they are. I mean, they're already in porn and they're curious. I mean, I've personally actually worked with some, and it was actually a bisexual scene. It's where they got their dick sucked by another man.
Okay. Was that a little weird?
A little at first, but then I was like, oh, this is kind of hot because it's just so taboo.
Okay. A lot of porn girls will not work with guys who are bisexual. Like there's even like a separation where you don't have guys that kind of jump back and forth between the gay world and the straight world. Like it happens, Sometimes they even have different names and stuff like that, you know, on the gay side and so forth. But in general, you don't see a lot of it.
Right.
Why were you okay with it when a lot of girls aren't? Just is what it is.
It is what it is.
Okay.
You know, I mean, even if you don't know, there's still that chance that they probably are, and you won't ever even know.
95% is a pretty big number.
Maybe 90%.
Okay, but you're not even saying 25% or 10% or whatever else. You're saying that the majority of male porn stars who do straight movies are...
I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do it on camera.
I'm not saying that.
Right.
I mean, have you ever seen stuff?
Off camera?
Yeah.
Like I said, I stay neutral. I typically just go to work, go to set, and then just come home. I don't really hang out with people unless it's like a social event and making, you know, just stopping by.
Okay. So what about on set and stuff like that? Have you ever been like, that dude gay? Look at that.
I mean, I've heard stories.
Yeah?
I've heard stories for sure. And I mean, some of them are just shocking. I'm like, what? Him? No. What? No way.
Well, I mean, if you look at certain things that are done in straight porn, some people will consider them gay.
Oh yeah, because I mean their dick is so close to the other dick.
You know,
you
or
have to have some sort
double
of
vaginal. Like I remember I interviewed Brian Pumper. He was telling me about triple vaginal, and I was like, I don't really want to think about that. Like that just sounds too crazy. That just sounds like
I wouldn't
a gay
be able
orgy.
to do that.
Like,
I've taken some big cocks, but I don't think I'd be able to do that.
You couldn't do double vaginal?
And plus, I mean, you have to be bisexual to do that, anyways. Your dick is rubbing on another man's dick. Teach his own, but.
So you're saying, okay, but like, I think Lex Steele's done double vaginal. You know, I've interviewed him. He considers himself straight.
Teach his own. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's what I say.
So your opinion is that if you're doing double vaginal, then that's gay.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty...
I mean, okay, so if your dick is rubbing another man's dick, it doesn't matter if it's going into a vagina or not. Are you going to be able to do the same thing in another man's... It's the same concept.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that.
If you can have a man's dick rubbing against your dick, then you wouldn't have a problem. I would imagine you wouldn't have a problem having another man give you a hand job or sucking your dick either.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even really like...
Teach his own. No judgment. I love my gay people. But
yeah. I mean, it's not my thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're gay, man, just say you're gay. Like, because when you're gay and you're a man, I feel like you're committed to the suffering. When you're gay and you're a woman, I feel like you're just sad until a man comes along. Like, a woman, I don't think can stop a man from being gay. Like, the right woman can't come along, I don't think can stop a man from being gay, but the right man can come along and make a girl straight real fast, because there's no such thing as like a gay woman, a lesbian. I don't believe that. They're confused. Even men are confused, but the thing is, like, the commitment that the man has is so much deeper. And like, even if he has a family, like, that's hard to come back from. Like, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but even if you have a family, sometimes you got to think like, man, like, I'm not just competing with women. I'm competing with men and women. I don't even know how to compete with men because I'm a woman. But if I'm competing with women, it's all good because I don't have to worry about that because I know what kind of woman I am. So I don't even have to worry about like even the stress of that because I'm like, I already have what I have and I know that I'm decent for a good man. A good man will appreciate me. If you got men and women on the roster, I'm sorry, there's no chance they can keep you. That's kind of what the thing is. Like, just say you're gay. Just be like, I agree with the woman. Like, just say just be honest. Like, just be upfront and out about it. Don't lie about it. But it is like the fact that they try to do the mental gymnastics and try to act like they're not gay because they try to be like not ashamed of it or whatever. Like, just say what it is. Like, even the women have to come to terms with the fact that it's gay. What they're doing is gay, and they're training their mind a certain way. Like,
but when you're doing something so much, and the amount that they have to go in and put in effort to go in and get stimulation to go and complete their job, they're going to require more stimulation over time to get the same effect. So while they do this at work, if they're going to want something more, this is what ends up happening. Like we had Alicia talking about, that you go to more and more extreme stuff. You're going to have to stop, otherwise it goes down a wrong path, right? And this is what ends up happening. And then when you're watching these people do these things, as it like with a child, you're going to start way out, like you're going to start at the edge of the pool, right? And then you get pushed into the deep end, right? And then when these guys, if you have a high percentage of these men that are already that way, they're going to start doing these types of tendencies while they're doing the stuff that is supposed to be for straight people, because they're gonna this is just the way they are. Like she said, one girl was talking about how the guy was all wanting to rub his thing against another man and all these kinds of
Yeah,
things.
he was amped for it. It was weird. He was pushing it. He was angry that she wasn't trying to do that. That's weird. And it was a European man. That's crazy.
But then you have the companies that are pushing for this and pushing for the more extreme, pushing for this transgender stuff, which is being pushed on the kids. And what are they teaching them in school? There are even people who are in porn that say this should not be used for sex education for kids, but it is.
Even that one feminist said that she wouldn't put it in schools.
Yes.
Like, yeah, well, it's like,
should it be in schools? Anybody who says
no, but I'm saying like even her, like,
Well, and this is the whole point. The brakes need to be put off, because all of this stuff is being pushed on children. People can sit down and argue till their cows come home about what adults do. That's their business. But if anybody's going to sit down and say that a child should be able to access this stuff, you belong in prison, right? Like I don't even care. Like if you're going to sit down and say that this needs to go in front of the kids, there is something wrong with your brain. Like end of story. End of story. And this is what the woman was saying, is that, like, she talked about the tortured women. But what about the children? Children are way more vulnerable than women, right? So why are you going to push this stuff? And if the women are getting tortured, why are you going to let the women getting tortured be placed in front of children so that they're done? The girls are going to be wired to think that getting tortured is okay, right? And
that's pretty much it.
And the more abuse that a girl will go through when she's young, the more abuse she will take when she's older. And she will just, and this happens. So you watch women when they get abused, men too. But when you watch women get abused, they just accept it. It's like the domestic violence victim. She gets beaten so much that chaos becomes normal to her, and she craves it.
Yeah, battered woman syndrome.
The same thing with men. If they get abused when they're kids, the abuse becomes normal, and they'll seek out the women that are going to drive them insane, that are just, they're codependent, and they're going to be having this back and forth, completely dysfunctional relationship until one day he snaps and then he beats her half to death. Because
that's why you're not supposed. That's why you're not supposed to treat people the way they treat themselves. You're supposed to treat people the way God instructs you to treat people, because a lot of times people will abuse themselves and disrespect themselves without even realizing it. Like a girl tells you to do something that crosses boundaries, you shouldn't do that. You should still maintain your respect and discipline and self-control and boundaries as a man. Just because she tells you to spit in her face doesn't mean that you should actually spit in her face. Because if you have any respect for God or yourself, you're not going to do that, or even her. Like, you're not going to do that. That's just not what you do. Like, literally and hypothetically. And that's what people do today. Someone comes along, tells them to spit in their face, and then they're like, okay, they're so anxious. They're such addicts to exploitation. They're so anxious for the opportunity for someone to tell them, please disrespect me. And then they can use that as an outlet and excuse to be a vile human being. Oh, she gave me permission. Well, what kind of sick freak of a human are you to enjoy exploiting individuals when they give you permission? Someone says to walk them around the park like a dog. Are you going to do that too? Like, nah, bro. They tell you to jump off a cliff. You going to do that too? Well, just because they tell you, okay, well, yeah. No.
Yes. And let's take a short commercial break and we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Yeah, so let's, go to mypillow.com/Karis or call 800-845-2942. Use the promo code Karis. They got lots of good stuff, beds, bed sheets, pillows. He's the pillow guy. Check out the energy drink if that's your thing, or the kitchen stuff, whatever. Go check it out. Or you can support on Rumble, BitChute, or Facebook at the All My Links /Karis Project, or you can look at the support with the donor box or the Give Send Go that you see in the ticker. Support a good cause. If you like what you see here, if you feel you want to, find a way to support, right? Help out the good stuff and support the fight against human trafficking, which is what we like to do here. And now we're going to go back and we're going to come back and we're going to start talking about agency, the female agency and freedom that came with the sexual revolution. So let's get into it.
I also want to touch on the word guilt as well, because I remember that being pertinent to our conversation. But if I reflect on those 3 words, Louise, autonomy, emotional freedom, and agency as the byproduct of the sexual revolution, would you agree with that?
Yes and no. So I think that, can I give an example that is quite dark, but I think throws us immediately into some of these really difficult questions about freedom and whose freedom, right? There's this line from Matthew Arnold that I really like. Freedom is a really good horse to ride, but to ride somewhere. Freedom ought to have a purpose, right? And so an example from my professional life, which I think highlights some of the issues about sexual revolution promoting freedom, the law around BDSM. I won't go into the details because it's boring, but there's complicated law around BDSM, basically. So this is bondage, domination, sadomasochism. So people basically doing consensually violent or abusive things in sex. So stuff that would be illegal if there weren't consent, pretty much. And the law around it is complicated. The law basically says that you can consent up to a certain level of harm. And then above that level of harm, you're criminally liable. And if something goes wrong, you're done for it. And there's been ongoing campaigns by proponents of sexual freedom to loosen these laws and to make it so that you can consent to more than what you legally can at the moment. So consent to serious body modifications as a sex thing, or consent to quite serious violence as a sex thing. If something goes wrong at the moment, you might be criminally liable. So me and a bunch of other feminists set up a group called We Can't Consent to This. The reason we did this is because there were an increasing number of cases in the UK, this isn't unique to the UK, of women who had died during sex and their partners claimed that they had consented to the violence that killed them. So this was normally strangulation, but there were other horrible ways in which these women died. And these men were getting away with this in the sense that they were successfully claiming, no, this was all just a sex game. And they were successfully avoiding a murder prosecution and sometimes getting very light sentences for manslaughter. And I think this is a really, really good example of freedom for who and freedom for what. Because you can completely see why
Yeah, honestly, every single time you participate in strangulation, which they call choking, it's actually strangulation. Choking is when your esophagus, like you get food stuck and you choke. That's choking. Strangulation is when you put your hands around someone's neck, either both hands or just one or whatever, and you cut off their airways. And actually, every single time you do that, you cause damage to someone's neck. And also because you have your thyroid and other things in your neck, you can cause damage to that as well. And people don't actually understand how much damage can be caused in participating in that. And, there's a particular points on the neck where if you press, then because the reason why people actually get that rush in their brain when they're experiencing that is because they're cutting off the airways. So that like rush of endorphins or dopamine or whatever is because you're losing oxygen. And it's not funny, but like it's funny because that shouldn't be something that people participate in. And a lot of people, I've seen people say, okay, well, when women, a lot of times women are the ones who initiate that. Again, if a woman told you to spit in her face, you shouldn't participate in that, because that's something that you should understand is just not acceptable. And if a woman says, okay, well, that I'm not participating in this act with you, then just say, then I'm not sleeping with you, because that's not something. A lot of times women engage in that is because they learned it through something that was abusive or something that was not. And there are women out there that are just like, oh, I just want to be deviant and debauchery and whatever else. But a lot of times it's from something else. I mean,
But
maybe
you
not
have to
every case, obviously, but
you have to remember though that they've given a shift in the power dynamic in favor of the women, so that the women become the drivers, especially to make them become the drivers in sexuality. And then it pushes
right.
men back. And a lot of men are like, well, if I don't do this, then I won't get the woman, and then I'll be by myself. And you're looking at all of this kind of stuff. And there's all these psychological aspects that they don't talk about with men. And they always default to
But
the man being the aggressor. And
do
this
you know
is
what? Sorry. Go ahead.
my I'm saying is that some of the women, they want this. And
Right, but I'll tell you why. The reason why a lot of women, I've heard a lot of women say that the reason that they want such aggression intimately is because men are pansies during the day life, and they feel like the only time that a man is actually dominating them, so to speak, is intimately, but they can't take the lead in anything else, and they have to go through this extreme form. They are emotionally and psychologically doing these gymnastics, being like, okay, well, if he doesn't lead in his day life, then I can push him through this debauchery to make me feel like dominated or that I'm being led or whatever. And then they go that way. But that doesn't actually make the
but
situation any better,
she's
because
trying
then they're like,
yeah, she's trying to use a female solution to help a man become a
exactly.
man, rather than doing what men say
Well, she doesn't
that
necessarily even want him to become a man. She just wants to feel the illusion of it in the moment, and that's why they end up. They don't respect them overall. They don't.
no. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's just it, it's becoming more and more dangerous. The more that you push the limits and everything else like that, like the one girl said, you eventually go to children, animals, and extremely violent stuff that's real, right? And this is where you end up. And when you're seeing this being pushed on people at a young age, they're going to get to that very quickly. And this is why you see so much of this nonsense and the trans thing and so forth, where this is being pushed. You're seeing a lot of grooming, and a lot of these people are there going in there wanting to fulfill their needs, right? And they're looking at it from themselves of getting their pleasure. But the people who are creating these and that have like monopolies and like big money, they're working with the big tech to get this into the hands of kids, right? People can argue what they want about what adults can do, but when it comes down to kids, none of this. I don't care how light it is, it don't belong in the hands of kids. And then what ends up happening to them when their minds are shaped this way? And they talk about the agency, they're victimizing kids. And when they look at the children, it's like they magically forget that the boys that were victimized as children grew up to be victimized men. But they don't look at that way because they look at the man he's acting out, and so he becomes a monster. So he goes from being a victim who doesn't get help, but then he just becomes a monster. But he's also a victim that nobody ignored. And if they paid more attention to the boys and helped them, there wouldn't be as many boys that grow into men that are acting out. And this is where feminism falls off the rails, because they can't solve the problem for men. They can't. They need the men to do that. They need the help of men to do that, because you look at the statistics of single mothers raising boys, it's atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. They're not going to figure it out, and it's not about money. It's not about any of this stuff. Let's look at the next thing here about the agency, and unless you have something else you want to say. Okay, let's go check this quick.
Some campaigners would want the law on BDSM to be much more liberal. And they would say, and they do say, I'm a consenting adult. Who are you to tell me that I can't do X, Y, Z in the bedroom? Who are you to tell me that the law ought to step in and try and criminalize what adults do in the privacy of their own homes? And you can see their argument. But then I say, okay, but the problem is we're all connected to one another, and your freedoms impact on mine. And this all, a society is greater than the sum of its parts. And if you're going to say that sexual freedom is the preeminent value, then I don't know what we do in these cases, these concrete cases where it seems to me that a terrible wrong has been done to this woman. And if we don't have illiberal laws, at least partially illiberal laws, then men who make this defense are going to get away with it. And so I'm sorry this is a dark example to kick off the conversation with, but I just think it's a pertinent example of how freedom is difficult and agency is difficult and choice is difficult. And we can say that these things are good generally. I think they are good generally, but they are virtues that need to be balanced against other virtues. And that's the challenge.
Freedom is a wonderful thing. No one would want to take freedom away from human beings, but excessive freedom without structure is not good for human beings. So I'll use the example because I talk about children a lot. If you raise your children with respect for their will, that is a good thing, right? You don't want to quash their will. You want to support their individuality and support their choices. And even when raising children, you're going to give them choices. Do you want eggs or waffles for breakfast? Do you want to wear your green pants or your blue pants? No more than that with small children. But if you don't provide any structure for them, they don't feel loved, they don't feel secure, they don't feel stable. And so what I'm afraid of is that we went too far. It's not that freedom isn't a good thing. It's that excessive freedom without any structure at all can also make us feel untethered, unbound, without connections to the people that we're most intimate with. And that's my concern. So it's not that sexual freedom isn't a good thing. It's that in my mind, it may have gone too far.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, interesting how it took all this for them to realize that it had gone too far. I'm pretty sure people could have told them that years ago before they started it. This is the problem with women's insight and foresight, that women often don't see the steps it takes to get somewhere. They'll see an outcome that they desire and that they want, and they're like, this is the route I'm going to take, not knowing every checkpoint they're going to hit on the way there. They'll hit every checkpoint, and by the time they get to the end goal they're like that they wanted, they're like, oh, matter of fact, never mind, this might not have been, I didn't sign up for this is not actually as good as I thought it was. They have buyer's remorse, and they're like, this was fraud. Start doing all sorts of gymnastics because they just don't think that way. They don't see that. And that's exactly why, what she was talking about, I don't know what cult she was a part of, but in a patriarchal sense, where in a proper way, you would have the protection and guidance of, men in your family, God, and men in your family to protect you from decisions that you can't see the consequences of, because in reality, we did not need to go through years and years of this nonsense and all the egregious things we're seeing now in order to get the answer and the conclusion for the circumstances that were outlined and laid out very clearly. And even to the point of having men using sexual means as an out of consent for murdering their spouses, saying they consented to it, when you can't tell me that you can't see that somebody's losing life in their body as you're doing something, and that's crazy. So, all of that can be attributed to feminism. I don't think in the years past you had men murdering their wives in the bed and getting away with it, saying, oh, well, it was consent. I'm sure the local men in the village would beat him to a pulp, because that's also going to affect them, because they had village mentality. That's one less woman that's going to contribute to helping the children and women, which makes all of their lives easier. And you've just made everyone's life worse by your own sick and twisted delusions and selfishness, like your sick, lustful desires that are wholly unrestrained. So it's like, no, we really didn't need, in real time, as this conversation goes on, they're actually demonstrating why women need men, the logic and reasoning of men and the circumstances of men to resolve these things, like preemptively and in real time. Like, it's like, this is actually funny. I'm not laughing, but it's funny.
Well, the whole fact of the matter is that women don't have the agency of men at being men. And this is the one thing that everybody's dancing around. Women are not going to be able to solve the problems that men were designed to do. They can't think like men. They can't. They're taking in their positions. They want the responsibility or the authority, but they want the power without the responsibility. And that's the whole point. Like, you can't do that. And this is what that one woman was talking about when she's talking about the guilt. She wants the power of being able to have the financial freedom to do all the work, but she doesn't want the responsibility of having to deal with the fact that you're sacrificing your own children to get this. If you have children and you're putting your career first, then you're damaging your children. This is responsibility. Like, women, okay, I do what you want, but they say 50% of the young women don't want to have kids because they're focused on a career. Then when they want to have kids, they can't, or some of them are having huge problems. And what is that happening? This is what's helping to contribute to the population collapse. This is one of the reasons why they're being able to start saying, well, we need immigration because women don't want to have kids anymore, so we need to bring in other people. And then everybody's complaining, oh, well, this and that. Well, you know what? You're out wanting to be a boss, babe. You don't want to have kids. A lot of the men want to have families, but you don't want to look at them. You're like, okay, well, I'm making more than these men because 60% of the women coming out of school, they're getting these jobs, and then they're making more money than men, so I can't have a man that's making less than me. He's got to have more, and he's got to take care of me, and all of that stuff. Who's making your life worse? Is it the men?
Right.
Or are you just putting yourself in a position where you don't want the men that you feel are beneath you?
And what's funny, that one girl, Angela White, when she was talking about like the effects of this stuff, that girl has like a PhD in sex something. Like, she done a whole thesis on it, and like what they're like, they know what they're doing, is what I'm saying. Like, she done a whole many years of research. I think she done a book about it, a whole thesis, everything.
She got a textbook. Like, she's in a
she got a textbook. Yeah, so it's like she knows what she's talking about. She's been, the way that they outline that stuff and how it's like affecting, it's like she knows what she's saying.
But there is a reason why there's these boundaries in society that men set up to deal with, because when the men come in to deal with the other men, they're not going to be as worried about hurt feelings. The men are like, well, you did this, well, now you got to get the consequences. But when you put women in what the sexual revolution did was took women outside of the protection of the men that love them. They want to go and have all this experimentation with something that someone that you would normally love and have boundaries with, and that they would take much care rather than using you and discarding you like a tool. And then when you take something like sex, which would normally be between people that love each other, and then you put it to a transaction what becomes money, then it becomes a very blurry situation. Because then they're like, well, I didn't like this or that. But if you were doing this with someone that you loved, there would be both restraint on both sides that isn't seen in a situation where you make it transactional. It just doesn't work that way. Right?
Right.
And so it's complicated. It's making things more complicated. And then when you look at the fact that these people are being groomed from being kids, they're being abused, they don't know up or down. Right? And then you're putting them into situations, because you look at the girls that are talking about being abused, they don't even know how to say no.
No, they don't.
Right? So
because a lot of times people put them in situations, they corner them, so like there really is no logical way to say no. Like you're like people really act like, oh well, I would have done that, okay, until you're in the situation yourself, and then tell me like that.
Well, women in my generation would have said no, where these girls aren't saying anything. They would. Because our generation was very different.
But you were allowed to beat people senseless for coming at you sideways in your generation. In this generation, you catch a case and go to jail for defending yourself, like for doing self-defense.
Well,
it's like they're throwing fathers in jail for refusing to transition their own children. Like you can't do self-defense today. You can't even have autonomy over your own child.
But
so it's like,
you know why that kind of stuff happened?
Well, feminism.
That's exactly it. Because these were things that were normally handled, and you had the men and the people in your community come in and deal with this. Women weren't put in all these situations where predatory men that could come after them. And it's just like,
exactly.
This is the one thing that the women, the feminists, are not discounting. They're acting like all men are the enemy. Like you're looking at it, it's like us and them, but then you're like, okay, well, we need some of these men to help us accomplish our goals, but the goals you're trying to accomplish following your plans are actually going to help destroy the social order for the men, because the more that you displace the men, what do you think is going to happen to the men? They're going to become more feminized, and they're going to go into more of that bisexuality and into that other stuff, and guess what happens? How many more men are you going to have? Not as many. And guess who's going to have more control? More of the predatory men.
Right.
So the way that you look at this, no matter which way you look at it, the more that you progress without taking the help of men and out working with men, you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to make worse.
Right.
Because you're helping to destroy the very ones that you need to help protect you, but then you're going to sit down and say, protect us, but then the predatory men are getting more of an avenue and more of the protection to continue preying on the women. I mean,
yeah, pretty much.
Everything has a trade-off. I'm not telling you what they should do. You have to understand that when you do certain things, you're going to forfeit other things. That's the way life works. Like the woman saying that, oh, I can't have guilt about the kids. Well, yes, you should have guilt about your kids because you're neglecting your kids, right? Like, biology is biology. Men, they can't do what the women does when their kids are young. They can't. So, what do you do? And when the kids get older, the women can't do what the men can do. So, that's really all there is to it. I'm saying it's just do what works. That's all I'm saying. And if you don't want to do what works and you get the consequences, you just have to deal with it. Like, nobody should be abused. But we have to take reasonable precautions to not place ourselves in positions of harm. And this is why the way it is structured. Men were generally the protectors of society. You can't kick them to the curb and then expect them to protect when you're throwing them off to a side and you're saying, "Well, I'm going to do this, but still protect me." Well, it doesn't work that way. Like, how if you can't, they get in problems for protecting you, and you have to just let you go. And then when that happens, they're like, "Well, why did you protect me?" Really?
Right.
Anyway, I'm going to close here with a prayer. I mean, we need to get back to sensibility and common sense and do things that work. Just make things simple, not complicated. Keep this stuff away from the kids, right? And stop fighting about stuff so that it's better to work together than to make it an us versus them. Anyway, and close here with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the hope that you have given us this day. Open our hearts and our minds to your will. And Father, this day, let the men and women to come together and help us as the men that we would humble ourselves before God and that we would come together to work with the women to rebuild our families, our community, our churches, and our nation, that we would have some protection from the children from this evil wickedness that is being pushed upon them. This is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dad, for the prayer as always. Yeah. Honestly, yeah, feminism, it really destroys our ability to have like the protection that we need in the home from men, or like your husband, your father, whatever. And that's really bad. Like it's opened the door for so many different things, and all the stuff that we're complaining about now would honestly be non-existent if we had a more traditional sense of things where, fathers were the protectors and the providers. And like my dad said, everyone has free will. You can do whatever you want. Still, you can accept the consequences of those choices as well. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's science, and it's also biblical. So anyway, thanks, guys, for your time and considerations. We'll check you in the next one. And to my dearest Karis, until we meet again, my friend, and we will ciao.